So you've got some money and you want to invest it. But the moment that you actually try to get around to doing it, it's like a wall of jargon with thousands of options and constant fear of making a super expensive mistake. So the question is, where do you even start? Well, I've invested north of £70 million for my clients over the last 15 years. And there's something that I've seen over and over again. Most people don't lose money because they've picked the wrong fund or a bad performing fund. They lose money because things aren't structured in the right way and what goes on in their own head. People overthink, they tinker, they panic. And all of that activity actually makes them worse off than if they'd just done nothing. So today, I'm going to walk you through the exact process that I use with real people to make sure that that doesn't happen to you. In fact, by the end of this video, I'm going to show you how to get your money properly invested using just one fund. And most people just never get to that point because they trip up long before they get there. But before we jump in, I'm going to use a super useful app that I've created that's going to help you with what we're talking about in this video and actually how to put it into practice. It's called the Risk Profiler. You're going to need it to go through this video. So download it from the link in the description below and we can get on with it. Right. So before you even think about investing a single penny, I need us to get on the same page. You need to clear the deck and make sure that you're starting from a solid foundation. Skip this bit and nothing else I'm about to show you works properly. So I worked with this guy once who was like super keen, super desperate to start investing. He'd be reading about compound interest and like watching videos, and he was really like palpably excited. So he comes in, he sits down and he goes, right, I've got 500 quid a month where, I want to do something with it. Where should I put it? I want to get the best returns. And I started asking him a couple of questions, as you do. And it turns out that he was carrying £4,000 on a credit card with 24% interest. And I'm thinking, mate, no investment on earth is reliably going to beat 24%. That credit card is basically a hole in the bottom of your bucket, a big hole. You can pour as much water in it as you like. It's just draining out of the bottom. So step one, if you've got high interest debt, so credit cards, store cards, anything above 6 or 7%, just clear them first, okay? Just need to get this out of the way before we actually start talking about investing, because people get this bit wrong. Getting rid of debt that is high interest is the best guaranteed return you'll ever get. That guy, we like sorted out all of his debts, cleared his credit card in like 8 months or whatever it was. And when he came back and started talking about it again, essentially he was able to invest for a really good basis and the full 500 quid a month, firstly, rather than paying off some of that as debt as well. And he's done really, really well ever since. Just very quickly, before we move on, I send out a free weekly email where I share these exact wealth building strategies, stuff that I've picked up from 15 years of helping people with this stuff. Stuff that I can't always put in videos. There's a link in the description, takes 2 seconds, and think you'll get a lot out of it. So, step 2. This is where the first piece of the actual puzzle starts coming into place for investing. The first thing you need to do is you need to pick the right wrapper. What that means is, in the UK, typically that'll be a stocks and shares ISA. Now, think of an ISA like a lunchbox. The lunchbox itself doesn't actually feed you. What you put inside the lunchbox, that's what matters. The lunchbox just protects your food. An ISA protects your money from tax. So you currently have an ISA allowance of £20,000 a year where you pay 0 tax on anything that your money earns within them. So no tax on growth, no tax on income, nothing. If you're investing outside of an ISA, you're basically handing money to HMRC, just a slice of your gains for absolutely no reason. And because HMRC would never dream of making something so straightforward, I should mention that this allowance is use it or lose it. If you don't use it by April the 5th, it's gone and it resets again. So this is your absolute first port of call, okay? Then there is a fork in the road. So you've cleared your debt. You've got your ISA open. Your lunchbox is ready. Now you need to decide what to actually put into it. And this is where most people start going really wrong with their decision making. Essentially, you've got 2 paths in front of you, and choosing the right one, it might be genuinely the most important investment decision you're ever going to make. So, path 1, you hand the wheel to somebody else. Path 2, you drive yourself. Now, listen, for some reason, there is so much ego, there's so much arrogance that goes on in the investing world with people thinking like, oh, I know better than blah, 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 blah. The truth is, for most beginners, if you genuinely are the first pound that you're ever investing, and I genuinely mean this, path one is the better choice, okay? Platforms like Nutmeg, Money Farm, Wealthify. I actually think Nutmeg is JP Morgan now, actually, but that was what Nutmeg was very recently. These sorts of platforms are absolutely brilliant for people who are just getting started and just want to start make their money work for them. You answer a few questions about your goals and how you feel about risk, and they just get on with it, right? They pick your investments, they adjust them as they're needed, they monitor performance, and most importantly, they keep you from doing something daft that when markets wobble or go a bit crazy, you know that someone else is steering the wheel for them. Path number two, that's do it for yourself. Okay, and we'll talk a little bit about how to do that in a minute. But essentially, this is the two paths that you need to do. Now, the staying invested bit, why does that matter? This is why I think beginners should use Robo-advisors. Why does this matter? There's a study that tracked investors over 30 years. In 2024, an average investor trailed the actual market by almost 9 percentage points. Not because of like bad funds or picking the wrong stock, but because they couldn't stop fiddling. They were chopping and changing, they were jumping in and out. A robo-advisor stops you from doing any of those things. It stops you from jumping around and second guessing and all of those things. Now, on a £50,000 portfolio, the behavior gap that we've just talked about could cost you 4 or 5 grand in a single year. Not because the market was bad, but because you pulled your money out of the worst possible time or changed funds or got in the way of compound interest. A robo-advisor service, a managed solution that charges you like 300 quid a year to prevent you doing that. Honestly, that to me is one of the best deals in finance. But here's the thing. Some of you watching this are thinking, no, look, okay, I get what you're saying, but I want to understand this properly. I want to do it myself. And that is completely valid. So if you want to take the DIY route, which you absolutely can, and indeed, even if you go down the robo-advisor route first, you should graduate into this over time. You need a framework. Okay, this is my biggest advice to you. If you're going to go DIY, you need a framework. And without one, you're basically a kid trying to build like a Lego spaceship with no instructions. You might end up with something that looks like vaguely right, but there'll be bits left over and it will fall apart the second you pick it up. Okay, so this is the DIY framework. So here are the instructions. If you're going to go DIY, the whole thing comes down to 2 questions. Okay, when do you need this money? And how much wobble can you stomach? So that first question, your time horizon, it's more important than most people realize. If you need the money that you're investing within like the next year or the next couple of years for like a house deposit or something really super important, it shouldn't be anywhere near the stock market. Okay, full stop. Markets go up over the long term, i.e. 5 to 10 years, but in any given like 1 to 3 year window, anything can happen. Like I don't know what's going to happen with the stock market in 6 months, and no one else does either. I've seen people put like their house deposit money into the stock market, watch it drop by 15% in the next month, and just before they need the money, and the look on their face when you do that, it ain't great. So if you're investing for 10, 15, 20 years out, that changes everything. Over that kind of time, the stock market has been the best way for normal people to grow their wealth. Nothing else even comes close. Okay, so that's the first question. The second question, how much wobble can you stomach? This is essentially what we call attitude towards risk. And this is where it gets personal to you. And honestly, most people get this wrong because they answer it when they're feeling brave and excited, right? They'll fill out some questionnaire on a Tuesday when the markets have gone up by 1% and they're feeling optimistic and they think, I want to be aggressive. I want to get on board with this. So they put all their money into the stock market. It drops by 20% and suddenly they can't sleep. Okay. The plan that you can actually stick with the level of risk that you can actually stick with beats perfect every single time. It beats a perfect plan that you abandon and panic every single time. Now, understand these questions and how they impact your investments is absolutely critical in understanding what mix of things that you should have in your investments. And this is where a massive misconception trips people up. When most people hear the word investing, they automatically think the stock market, right? They picture trading screens, ticker symbols, Wolf of Wall Street type of stuff. But that is only half the picture, okay? And honestly, it's the half that scares people away unnecessarily anyway. So when you invest, you really are doing one of two things, okay? You're either becoming an owner or you're becoming a lender. That is it. Genuine. When you boil it all down to all of these different things, you're either becoming an owner or a lender. That is it. Those are the only two building blocks. Every investment that you've ever heard of is just some mix of these two things. So stocks is a great example of being an owner, or equity as we call them. When you buy a stock, you're actually buying a tiny slice of an actual company. You own a piece of it. If that company does well, your slice becomes more valuable. If it pays out profits, you get a share of those too. It's called a dividend. But if the company has a rough year, or more likely it goes bust entirely, your slice can lose value or become absolutely worthless. You're sharing in the ups and the downs. That's the deal when you're an owner. Bonds is a great example of being a lender. That's on the other side. When you buy a bond, you are lending money, usually to a government or a big company, and in return, they promise you to pay you back at a set date and pay regular interest payments along the way. It's basically just like one big IOU. You're not sharing in anyone's success or failure necessarily. You just lent someone some money and they owe it back to you plus a little bit of interest, which is why bonds are generally calmer, more predictable, and frankly, a bit boring. But boring is good and boring has its place. So I was trying to explain this concept to my fiance a couple of weeks ago, stocks, bonds, owners, lenders. And she just goes, and this, I was partially offended by this, right? She goes, so stocks are like an exciting boyfriend and bonds are like a reliable one that you actually marry. And I was like, yeah, to be fair, that's kind of not far off. And as her fiance, yes, I did find that kind of offensive. Now, stay with me here because this next bit is the reason your portfolio doesn't fall apart when things go wrong. So these two things that we've just mentioned, owning and lending, stocks and bonds, they actually tend to behave differently from each other. So it's called correlation. When the economy and everything is good and everything's roaring and everyone's confident, stocks tend to do brilliantly. And over a longer period of time, stocks will do much better than bonds. But when things get shaky and people get nervous, recession, crisis, pandemics, stocks can drop super, super hard. And bonds, more often than not, will hold steady or even go up. It's sometimes what's called negatively correlated or has very, very low correlation with the stock market. Because what happens is investors tend to rush from the stock market to the reliability of those IOUs. So what you tend to find is they balance each other out. They have that negative correlation with each other. So essentially, when stock markets go down, bonds tend to, not always, and recently definitely not, go up. Not perfectly, not every time, but over the long run, that push and pull between those two, that's what gives your portfolio stability and helps you stay invested. And this is why understanding this matters. Because once you get this concept, once you understand that it's about blending these two assets towards your attitude towards risk and time horizon, you will never panic during a crash again. You'll know exactly that your bonds are going to do exactly what they're supposed to do while your stocks are on sale effectively. So now you know what stocks and bonds actually are. Let's figure out the split of what you should have potentially in each. So the simple way to work out what your mix is, the more money in equities or stocks, the higher the potential growth, okay? Now, the higher the growth, but the bumpier the ride. The more in bonds, the smoother the ride, but the slower the growth. So if you're investing for 15 plus years and genuinely don't panic easily, you might be comfortable with like 80 to 100% in equities in the stock market. If you're investing for like 5 to 7 years, or you're worried and nervous, or it's the first time you invested, you might want a much more cautious split, maybe 40 to 60% in equities in the stock market. Now, I've mentioned there's a super useful app to help you with all of this. So what I want you to do is go over to that now while you're looking at this, because getting the right stocks of split of stocks and bonds is going to be the single most important decision you are going to make in your investment journey. So I'm going to jump over to the app, tell you how to use it and how you can use it to shape those investment decisions. Okay, so what you're going to see here is the risk profiler tool. Essentially, we talked about the split between stocks and bonds. This is going to help you understand what broad level of split that you should potentially be going for based on those two key questions that we talked about, okay? Now, the risk profiler app, first and foremost, this is not advice, okay? This is not me telling you what you should be doing. This is a tool for educational purposes and to help you start framing what type of approach you might start to take. So there's a big caveat when you open this up, okay? Do not make any decisions just based on this. It's not advice. But what this is going to do is take you through, once you open it up, take you through a series of 9 simple questions, okay? So again, think about you're investing some money. What are you going to do, or what are your responses in reference to that money that you're investing? Okay, so what I'm going to do is just fly through these really, really quickly. Remember, take your time, answer these properly, be honest with yourself is the key part, because a lot of people aren't, okay? Be honest about it. Don't just answer this when you're excited because the stock market's gone up. But essentially what you're going to get after you've answered these 9 questions is this. It is going to tell you, look, generally speaking, what you've told us means that your risk profile, your general risk approach is fairly balanced, okay? So this will change depending on the answers that you've given as to how you feel about investing and volatility and things like that. So that answers broadly one of those first questions, doesn't it? How do you feel about when things wobble, when things get scary, what you can and can't do, your capacity and attitude towards risk? Now, what it will then do is tell you, okay, based on your time horizon, what level of estimated equity exposure you might, key phrase, not should, might want to take. So, for example, we know in this case that the person is a balanced investor, broadly. So, if you then said, right, okay, I have got some money that I'm not going to touch for 20 years. Let's say it's in your pension and you're investing in your pension. If you've got that money for 20 years, broadly speaking, you might be comfortable with having 80% of your invested money in the stock market, okay? Now, really handily underneath all of this is the reference table. So what you can see here is the 5 risk profiles. So we've broadly split this into just 5 risk profiles, 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. So 1 is like, I'm super scared. I don't really want to take much risk with my money. You know, I'm really, really worried. 5 is like, I don't care, whatever. I love speculating. I buy crypto, whatever. And then also you'll see that referenced by the irrelevant time horizon. Okay, so you can see, broadly speaking, as the time horizon increases and as the risk profile increases, the level of equity risk you can take or should be thinking about taking can increase because you have more time and more capacity and a better attitude towards risk. So really have a play with this to understand like what your risk profile is as a human being. Like, okay, who am I? What do I want to do? It's based 3 out of 5. Have a play with the questions to make sure that they, work well for you, and then marry up the estimated time horizon of what you want that money to do. So in this case, let's say you are balanced and it's money that you need within 2 years. Well, if any equity risk at all is in the portfolio, it should only be around that 20% mark. So again, not a hard and fast rule, not advice, certainly not telling you what to do, but this will start shaping you to say, okay, look, do you know what? If I'm a balanced investor, so that's broadly who I am, and I've got 10 years that I can just put some money in, let it go, you should be looking at broadly 60% equity for your money. Okay, so going back to that split, that is where that split comes in. 60% in stocks, 40% in bonds, if this was appropriate for your exact circumstance. So there you go. That's a great indication of how to use this app. Download it in the link below. It's free to use. Have a play with it. Again, try and test it out, see what it might say for you. But it's worked really well for others, and I hope it's going to be useful. Okay, so you've now got your number, okay? 60-40, 80-20, whatever it is. It doesn't actually matter. Now, the next point is how do you actually do it, right? It starts, how do I actually put this into place? Now, most people will start looking for good stocks or searching around for the best investment funds, right? There's loads of them, dozens of them, comparing fees, comparing performance, reading reviews, agonizing. Just don't do any of that. Here's what to do instead. So the guy who trained me, like proper old school financial advisor he was back in the day, he told me something that I've literally never forgot. He was like, Josh, the biggest risk isn't picking the wrong investments. It's making too many decisions. And honestly, after 15 years, I can tell you that he's absolutely bang on. Here's why. The stock market as a whole is built to go up over time. It's what we call positive expectancy, right? It's just a jazzy word for will go up over time. It means that the odds are in your favor if you stay invested long enough. Over the last 100 years, the stock market has gone up roughly 7 out of every 10 years. That's over a century worth of data. So in the long term, the direction for stocks, it's up. Key phrase is long term. So to put a number on it, if you'd have put £10,000 into a global index fund 20 years ago and done absolutely nothing, not touched it, not traded, not second guessed it, you would be sitting on roughly £40,000 to £50,000 today. Not from being clever, just from being patient. But this is the bit that catches people out, okay? This is such a critical point. Please, please, please get this in your head, right? Individual stocks, Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, whatever. Individual stocks do not have positive expectancy in themselves, okay? The stock market as a whole goes up. Individual stocks do not. In fact, most individual stocks actually end up either losing money over their lifetime or, more accurately, go to zero. Think about all of those stocks that people said, this isn't going anywhere in like the 80s. And think about where they are today. Gone, right? So individual stocks do not have positive expectancy where you can sort of like put your money in and never worry about it ever again. The moment you start picking individual stocks, individual sectors, or betting on AI as a theme, or deciding that you only want UK companies, or whatever it might well be, by doing that, you're introducing what I call failure points, right? Each decision is another variable, another chance for something to go wrong. And worse, each decision gives you something to second guess about yourself later, right? I've seen this all the time. When I work with people one-on-one, I'll say, okay, that's great. Like, how did you get to this point? Why have you made this decision? And people second guess and all of that sort of stuff, which, guess what? Leads to overtrading, leads to selling when the markets go down, which leads to losing money. Certainly money that you didn't need to lose. So the solution is to buy the whole haystack instead of researching every single needle. Now, the simplest way to do that is with a fund that holds both your stocks and your bonds in the exact split that you have chosen based on what we've talked about, okay? One fund, one solution that gives you that split that you've already realized that you want based on your time horizon and attitude towards risk. A brilliant one for this is the Vanguard Life Strategy range, okay? So if you've decided that you want 60% equities, you buy the Vanguard Life Strategy 60. That is it, because that fund has 60% exposure to equities. Haven't got enough time in this video to go through the Vanguard Live strategy seriously. I've done some other videos on it, I think. So have a little look through there, or just research them yourself straight with Vanguard. They're brilliant one-stop shops. So again, know your equity exposure risk by doing the risk profile tool. Pick a multi-asset fund, they're called. Vanguard Live Strategy is a brilliant one of them. That's it. That's your fund. That's it. Do not overthink it. And I know what you're thinking, right? Over 15 years of experience, and that's my one big secret: buy one fund. What a genius. But the beauty of this is it rebalances itself automatically. So again, you already know that it's going to be the right attitude towards risk. It's never going to have more or less than that equity exposure. You never have to decide like what to sell, what to buy, whether you're making a mistake by tilting towards the S&P 500. You just set up a monthly contribution, takes 10 minutes tops, and just get on with your life. No checking your phone every morning, no reading the market news, no lying awake wondering whether you should sell, add more, or move to the FTSE 100. Your money is working. You're not worrying about it. And that's what good investing actually feels like, okay? And I know that sounds almost too simple. Like it can't possibly be enough. But the people who lose money investing aren't unlucky. They're just overcomplicating it. The less you do, the more you keep. But here's something that I haven't told you. All of that's all very well, but it only works if you know when to stop. Seriously. Now, there is a specific number, your coast number, that once you hit it, the rules completely change, which is why you need to watch this video here next. Because if you get this wrong, you'll end up working years longer than you needed to, or run out of money. So I'm going to walk you through exactly how to find out yours in this video here. So give it a click and I'll see you there.